Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm not gonna comment about the time delay between my last video and this one. It's been quite some time, but here I am. So this video is going to be about a quick recap before we move on to the next ones. So we're gonna talk about what we learned so far. First of all, most importantly, we learned about the basics of Linux. The idea was that even before we get started on anything that has anything to do with DevOps, we need to know our systems well, which is Linux in this case. So it is important to be familiar with the fundamentals of Linux. And why is that? Why do we need to learn about Linux? Because everything that we manage in this case is powered by Linux. Be it a container, be it a virtual machine or anything, it runs on a Linux system. So it is crucial that we know and understand Linux very well before we move on to actually using those tools. So we started with learning how the internet works, and then we learned to set up a virtual machine and then SSH into it, and then we learned basic commands that are absolutely required by anyone who is working in this industry. Then we talked about file descriptors, standard out, standard error, and things like that. And we learned about file system, environment variables, users, permissions, etc. Then we learned to manage packages, services, processes, etc. And we learned to edit text using the text editor Vim. And we learned a few debugging commands, that is ps, netstart, curl, and etc. Then we moved on to hosting and managing websites. As a DevOps engineer, we usually have to manage web applications. So we need to understand the basics of it. So we talked about web servers like Nginx, and then how virtual hosting works, and then DNS and managing domains. And then we moved on to a simple static website using Nginx. And then we talked about a more advanced dynamic websites with Nginx and with Node.js and Nginx reverse proxy. And in the same, we explained about the concepts of proxies and reverse proxies. And then we learned about MySQL in detail. As in, not exactly in detail, but in detail for a beginner. So at this point, we were pretty familiar with all the concepts that are absolutely required, and we were ready to take our baby steps into the DevOps world. So we did that. So we learned about what infrastructure as code and config management, etc. means. We did a lot of stuff using Ansible and version control using Git and GitHub. And we talked about deploying applications, and we talked about securing websites with TLS. Then we moved on to some of the key concepts of DevOps, that is Agile, Scrum, CI/CD, etc. And then we did Jenkins. We did a fully automated production-ready Node.js deployment using Jenkins. And last but not least, we used WordPress and Nginx and PHP FPM to create a more complicated dynamic website. And that's where we are. So if you have watched these videos until now, you should be pretty good with basics of Linux, and we should be fairly comfortable with managing web applications. And we know what the word DevOps is all about, and we may know one or two DevOps tools like Jenkins, Git, Ansible, things like that. So what's next? We have a lot to go, but the next steps would be about monitoring. Like right now, we have a lot of systems that we have developed locally, a lot of servers running, a lot of processors running. And at this point, we need to be able to monitor them. We need to be able to tell them when they are not behaving the way that we want them to. Or if one of the server is down, we need to be able to know. So in the next video, we will talk about infrastructure monitoring. So that's it for now. Thanks again, and see you in the next one.